Hello, I'm back and I'm back for good. Long gone are the days where I say I can't promise when the next video is. 2026 is going to be a year of Adam videos. I am here to stay. So what's going to be my first topic? Oh, Jesus Christ. This is one of my bigger hot takes, I'd say, because while not many people hail it as his best, very few would give it that bottom spot, especially under his interwar period, which don't worry, we will get to very soon. The first 10 minutes I thought were kind of interesting, but what preceded was a 2-hour melodrama of basically the same scene over and over and over again. Even in Kurosawa's lesser films, I always find moments that remind me why he's the king. However, here there is nothing that would give you a clue that this is the greatest director of all time. I mean, it has the odd nice shot and blocking, but that's the least you can expect of the absolute emperor that he is. Maybe it's because it was adapted from a Dostoevsky book, and I guess Russian literature's just not for me, and I can kind of see why people like it, but no. This is the only Kurosawa film that I can say I honestly hated watching. Alright, here we go, controversy. So during World War II, Kurosawa was given permission to make films with no obligation to join the army, as long as the films were in aid of helping the Imperial Japanese message, be they morale boosters or glorifications of Japan's truthfully very controversial past. This is something that Kurosawa would later in life openly regrets, and it's not even like all directors did this. My second favourite director from that period, Masaaki Kobayashi, is someone who resisted that and just didn't make films till after. This is the last film from that shameful period, however it didn't see the light of day until 1952 due to heavy Japanese censorship. However, context aside, this is a 59-minute film that somehow feels like his longest. Truthfully, it's just one scene that is stretched out to an hour runtime. And what would make either a decent short film or a nice little moment in a better, bigger film ends up being a really indulgent, repetitive snooze fest that I am just so glad this period was over when I got to this point of my marathon. That said, Kenichi Onomoto is quite fun to watch, and if I was involved in the 1940s Tokyo comedy scene, he probably would have been my favourite singing comedian. Anybody who's seen this film knows that it is a miserable sequel. The first act of this film had me fairly hooked. I could kind of see how it was the blueprint of other sports sequels to come later in Hollywood. However, if you asked me to say anything that happened in the second or third acts of this movie, I would probably say people spoke Japanese and Kurosawa filmed them doing that. Other than that duel in the weeds, which is pretty cool, and Kurosawa would later cite in his book was the worst weather experience of his entire filming career. Now, after the end of the war, we see a 5-year period of Kurosawa films where the incentive behind him making them is totally flipped. Now America had control of the Japanese film industry, and instead of being asked to make pro-Japanese propaganda, he was now pressured to make firmly anti-Japanese films, which resulted in a string of quite depressing realist films about the state of Japan at the time. While this period does have some really great films, The Quiet Duel is my least favourite, and not to sound too repetitive, but it's really boring. I don't remember much about it, and my memory loss has not come from the distance of time since I watched it. As soon as this ended, I don't think I could have named a single thing that happened. That said, it's quite a nice looking film, even though the stream that I watched of it was quite poor quality. And the music's good from what I remember. So it's not quite as worse, but not one I'd recommend you really watch. Now this is a very tough one to rank because I feel like it would be a few notches higher if the full film was still there. Due to the war, a large chunk of Kurosawa's debut film was completely destroyed, and what is left is a pretty good film. In fact, I remember sitting there about 30 minutes in being dumbfounded at how the man's debut was this well made and how his visual storytelling was already this well actualized on his first film. I mean, especially the section of the film where Sanshiro is training, I mean, it's just beautiful cinema, which makes it even sadder that the rest of this film has just been so badly handled, and the restoration, while doing its best, really isn't anything special. For any fan of the director, this is an essential but wholly very frustrating watch, and what probably was a pretty good sports movie. Now hear me out, putting Kurosawa's most pro-Japanese movie of these early 40s propaganda films at the top, do I agree with this movie? Of course not. Is the whole message of rising above your station in aid of Imperial Japan fucks? Yes. Does this movie begin with a text that says attack and destroy the enemy? However, as a film about rising above your station, and for something that is supposed to inspire the audience, I actually think it does work. Which is really fucked because it makes it a really effective piece of propaganda However, disregarding all that, I actually found this film quite compelling. And the acting was very good. It's actually kind of a feminist film for its time. I mean, it's no Maiden Dagenham, but you know, I'm sort of clutching at straws to defend this movie here. By no means is it a masterpiece, and by all means is it completely messed up. But did it make me want to work harder at school? Hell yeah. I'm pretty sure there was blackface in this film. I watched it a long time ago, so I don't fully remember, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, that aside, this is a fairly interesting film about the paranoia in Japan after the Hiroshima bombing. It has a very good central performance, and the score's good, but that aside, it's not an essential, but worth a watch. We're finally getting into his genuinely good films, and this is the only film by him where I feel the cinema is not quite where it belongs, and by that I mean, it would work much better as a play. A very strong script by Kurosawa, and performances all round great, especially from Mifune. It's all about class divide, which is a subject Kurosawa has written about time and time again, and proven he knows how to write about. I wouldn't watch it again, but it's worth a go. After a trudge of dark, muddy, depressing post-war films, where a slightly more liberated Kurosawa was making better, but again, much more depressing movies, Scandal is a great break from that. The plot itself isn't too deep, it's just a scandal drama. However, the central heart of the film comes from Takashi Shimura. He plays a lawyer, and he plays a lawyer very, very well, whose daughter is sick. It's quite a strong script, and Shimura gives it all he's got, with some incredible lines throughout. Not a massively deep film, not a massively well-made film compared to the ones that are coming in this list. However, a slightly underrated gem in Kurosawa's filmography that ends the 40s pretty nicely. As part of that muddy, depressing post-war period that I was telling you about, I think Drunken Angel is the total epitome of all of that. It's the first movie I watched by him that I didn't love. However, a rewatch did make me appreciate it a lot more. What this film has really got going for it is the two central performances by Takashi Shimura and Toshiro Mifune, two alumni of the Kurosawa acting school who will feature a lot in this video. The two characters bounce off each other very well with how different they are. The film uses set design amazingly and looks beautiful. I'd be lying if it said it had me the whole way through, however it is probably the first really good film on this list. Now this may seem quite low to some of you, but I do love this movie. We've got to remember who it is we're dealing with here. On par with Drunken Angel, this film doesn't necessarily have me in the palm of his hand from start to finish. However, it definitely has some amazing moments. Kurosawa really goes for broke on the whole symbolism side of things when writing this, and it feels like a kind of piece of literature that you would study in school. I can imagine Hitchcock actually doing this one really well, but I'm glad the script ended up in the hands that it did. Well, that was because he wrote it, but you get what I mean. A tense and thought-provoking thriller, although not the tensest, almost thought-provoking thriller we will cover in this video. Taking a big-time jump from the 1940s, we go to the man's penultimate film, and one of the most contentious among fans. Many see the anti-Hiroshima film as closed-minded and not telling the whole truth of Japan's actions from before Hiroshima. But the way I see it, most of Kurosawa's films are very heavily anti-Japanese, so I think he's earned one film to just be like, you know, Hiroshima bad. Not too much happens throughout the film, it's a bit more of like a mood piece that just explores the themes of trauma and overcoming tragedy in your old age. It follows the most adorable old Japanese woman who is with her grandchildren. All the trauma from the bombing is forced to come back up when the grandchildren are asking about it, and one can't help but see the whole film as a metaphor for how the younger generation should stay educated about these old tragedies so we don't forget. Richard Gere is in this film, and he's one of only 2 American actors to feature in a Kurosawa film. However, his presence really doesn't feel out of place. He actually puts in a really great performance, and you will never guess who the other American actor in a Kurosawa film is, but we'll get to that. Many unforgettable moments in this soft, gentle, meditative film. My only big criticism is the ending. That needle drop is just wacky and laughable. The opposite to a lot of his early films, the first half of this film was the part I struggled with. It seemed like a pretty bog-standard anti-war movie about students rebelling, however in the second half, it totally shifts as the main character does a Moses of sorts and moves in with her dead husband's family on a farm. Her husband is seen by the village as a traitor, and she tries to restore his image by putting in hard work. And in the second half there's little to no dialogue throughout. It's an extremely patient piece of filmmaking, and the first moment in watching these films in chronological order that genuinely blew me away was the second half of this movie. How beautiful it is. How much is conveyed with just facial expressions and really great editing. I mean, the film as a whole is nothing compared to the films he'll come to make. However, it's clear to see from this one that we're dealing with a legend here. A totally underrated moment of Kurosawa's career. Okay, I know this is shocking. Yojimbo at 17, but again, remember who we're dealing with. I love this movie a lot. In fact, as a fan, this is one I can just put on, sit back and just be like, yeah, he is the greatest director of all time. I mean, his eye for composition, the way the characters move and interact with the environment. One shot says so much, and if there's any proof needed, he's the best. This is it. However, my enjoyment of it was slightly hindered by the fact that I watched and loved the Western classic A Fistful of Dollars first, which is almost entirely a rip-off. Actually no, it's entirely a rip-off. I think a lot of the scenes would have been slightly more affected had I not already seen them before, and also slightly think that Sergio Leone did it better. However, nonetheless, this is great, and it features a great, although slightly underused performance from Tatsuya Nakadai as the villain, and this is the first time we're saying this name in this list, and I'm glad we're finally there, because he is the greatest actor of all time. It's also quite a funny film, led a lot by the no fucks given samurai Tsubaki Sanjuro, who I will talk about more when we get to the sequel, which I have a lot of positive things to say about. However, although this is fairly low down, don't miss out on it. It's a great film, and it's many people's favourites. From here on out, all these movies are 9 out of 10 or above. That's right, 16 of his movies are 9+. So this is the first film I'm going to talk about from that 1965 to 1990 period of time where he would make a film exactly every 5 years. He also made a documentary called Song of the Horse, which I have not seen because I cannot find it anywhere. See, in this period, despite the man revolutionising cinema, he really struggled to finance any films. By the point of Dersu Uzala, this was due to a few reasons. The fact that he had just made a flop, the rise of popularity in TV and decline of the Japanese film industry, but also his reputation for expensive perfectionism, and Japanese critics saying he's been too westernized, and some even calling him a traitor. This unfortunately led to a suicide attempt in 1971. However, he pulled through and did what he does best and tried to get a film out there. However, funding it was not easy, and so it led to him turning to Mosfilm Studios in the Soviet Union to get his lifeline deal. Kurosawa's turn to making a Russian film isn't totally out of character for him. He's openly expressed for his whole life how he's a fan of Russian literature, with the film that talks about The Idiot being adapted from a Dostoevsky play. And this film, befittingly, is about two people exchanging their cultures. You have a white military Russian man exploring the depths of the woods, and he comes across a Asian Russian man, and together they form this massive spiritual bond and walk in each other's shoes. It's an incredibly slow and beautiful, patient, meditative, all these words film that you just have to see. And due to it being in Russian, it just feels like a totally different film from everything else in his discography. It sticks out like a sore thumb in the best way possible. And even this winning the Oscar for Best International Film still made it hard for him to fund his next couple movies. Again, struggling to finance his films, Kurosawa now turned to the West, as the people he inspired to make films were now helping finance the movies he was making. And the producers on this were George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, who I doubt will be strangers to many people watching this video. It's quite poetic that the people he inspired were now giving him a helping hand at a time where he felt totally unloved. And what resulted is a really good film. It's another 3-hour-long epic jidaigeki. It features a great performance from Tatsuya Nakadai, who plays the aging warlord in this, as well as the doppelganger who takes over him. The scene in it that sticks out to me the most is the opening, where just in one shot with two people sitting down, the entire film is set up purely through dialogue, and it's an incredible way to start an otherwise really chaotic and action-packed movie. Very beautifully shot, extremely well directed, a great start to his two films of the 80s. It speaks volumes about Kurosawa as an artist that even his dreams are worth throwing millions of pounds at to make a movie out of. Dreams is an anthology film about various scenes that have played out in Kurosawa's unconscious mind. The vignettes get increasingly darker and darker, although end on quite a hopeful note with a nice positive one. The thing that links them together is they are all absolutely stunning to look at. And this is the film with the second American actor. Any guesses who it is?
This is a joke, right? This is a joke. Because, I told Lino.
Yeah, and to make it even stranger, Scorsese is playing Vincent van Gogh. I'm so glad this weird collaboration happened. And I'm incredibly jealous of Scorsese for this opportunity. I know it sounds extremely indulgent, making people sit through your artistic interpretation of your dreams for 2 hours, but it does not feel like that. And any pretension is washed away by how stunning of a film this is, how moving it is, how great the music is. Just watch it. This was the second Kurosawa film I ever watched, and luckily I was 15 and studying Macbeth in school, so this was great revision. This is the first of 3 Shakespeare adaptations that Kurosawa made, and it's probably the most straight-to-the-text adaptation out of all of them. Whereas in the source text I always found it a little bit hard to engage with in school, this is an incredibly compelling film that works so well plopping it in medieval Japan. The whole film has this really great slow burn rhythm that draws you in perfectly, and Mifune's performance is just mystifying. It also has one of the most satisfying finales to any Kurosawa film. Just another banger from the master. This is a monumental midpoint of Kurosawa's career for 2 reasons. Not only is it the beginning of the 5-year gap per film darkest period of Kurosawa's life, but it is also the last collaboration between him and Toshiro Mifune. Long-time collaborator and just one of the best actors ever. For the final time in 15 years, this is a film set in feudal Japan. However, it doesn't follow any group of samurais. It follows a hospital at the time, as a young, frustrated apprentice is brought in under the strict authority of the head doctor called Redbeard, played by Mifune. It works kind of like an anthology film, as we follow vignettes of lots of the different patient stories and how their past is linked in with what's going on now. Kurosawa is just amazing at writing these ensemble piece films, and this is no exception. I do think it is a tad overlong, which is probably my only criticism, but it's an absolutely beautiful film that you definitely should watch. The flashback sequences are just gorgeous. There's one bit that's set in the snow, which is just one of the most stunning pieces of his career, which is saying a lot. It's insane that this film isn't in the top 10, but Kurosawa, come on. This is Kurosawa's final film, and it cannot be expressed enough how much this works as a finale. The film picks up with a beloved professor retiring from his job, and the film follows him from that moment until his death. It's worth understanding what kind of movie this is before watching it, because I wish I did. I spent a lot of it quite frustrated at the little amount that was actually happening. However, this is, again, like Rhapsody in August, more of a mood piece. There's not any massive amount of conflict that happens during it, nor is there a really easy to explain story of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It's just his life. It's exploring the themes of being so loved and leaving your job, finding your purpose after having such a massive career, death, the fact that retiring doesn't mean all conflict ends. It's hard getting into what's great about this film without getting into details, and that would be confusing. So I'll say this, that Madadayo translated means not yet, and that is a phrase that is ritualistically repeated throughout the film as well as throughout the protagonist's life as he ages with the runtime. It couldn't be more clear that Kurosawa was sending us a message that he wasn't ready to stop making films, to stop giving, but as true as it is that a film must end, so must he. In the film, much like life, it sort of just happens and then stops. There's no happy ending, sad ending, or really an ending at all, yet the whole film is about the ending. So as a passing gift, Madadayo is the best farewell he possibly could have given us. The moment the titles appeared on screen, it was like a dead pulse confirmation that the man who I had spent hours watching his films and studying his films had died. And for that reason, I think it is one of the most powerful films ever made. And up there with All That Jazz as one of the best cinematic deaths of all time. I almost just cried. And we're not on the top 10 yet. However, this video is getting very long and my camera is overheating, so I'm going to split this into 2 parts. I tried to write a lot less about each film, however, that's impossible. With the filmography that this man has, I could just talk for hours. Stay tuned to see what makes a top spot, and what other recommendations I have for you in Kurosawa's filmography. He's not a musician, although if he was, he would probably be the greatest one ever. Thanks for watching, see you next time.